Okay, welcome back, and we're delighted to have back with us Dr. Neil Shenvi. He is a Christian author, speaker, researcher with a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. Yes, Berkeley, who writes extensively on critical theory, worldview, and faith. He's the author of a few books, including the latest one that he's co-authored with a friend of his, Pat Sawyer, entitled Post-Woke. There's a picture of the cover of the book, Post-Woke, Asserting a Biblical Vision of Race, Gender, and Sexuality. I think this is a great book. Check it out, Post-Woke. He does have a website, shenviapologetics.com, and that's spelled S-H-E-N-V-I apologetics.com. And there's a picture of the landing page. Dr. Shenvi, good to see you again. How are you?
I'm great, Barry. How are you?
Good. Thanks for your time. We value it greatly. Boy, much to talk about. I don't know how you put all this together. This is amazing. But let me ask you this. How did we get to redefining truth, gender, and all the other nonsense that we're dealing with in this culture?
There has been a long march to the institutions. So we're experiencing a legacy of 100 years of social change and activism from the left as they've tried to redefine these ideas. So critical theory, which is where wokeness comes from today, goes back all the way to Karl Marx. And his ideas were mainly about money and class, but later critical theorists in the 2030s applied his ideas of oppressors and oppressed to areas like race, class, gender, and sexuality, among others. And so in the 60s, then the left in the 60s were trying to capture the public's imagination, and they succeeded. So today, critical theory, you recognize it is Marxian, and then it divides society into oppressors and oppressed along lines of race, class, and gender. It sees norms and values as just the excuses of the ruling class, whether it's whites or men or heterosexuals, to impose their values on culture. And then social justice to them means dismantling the systems and structures that perpetuate the social binary. So tearing down things like the white Western notion of truth, even things like science, objective knowledge, meritocracy, gender binary, all of these ideas supposedly are just the ways the ruling class controls us. So that's where we are as society today, but it's been a long, slow progress, or maybe regress for decades.
Is critical theory the phrase that catches all this? I mean, that's the phrase that all this goes into?
We define wokeness, which we kind of recognize in culture. We see drag queen story hour. We see transgender beavers on kids' cartoons. We see organizations like Black Lives Matter. That's wokeness. We define that as the cultural expression of the ideology of critical theory. So it's sort of like how you might say you can see the effects of radical feminism in our culture in, say, for example, the normalization of sex work, in other words, prostitution. There are people out there that think that we should legalize prostitution, but that is downstream of these ideas that have been in our culture for decades. So I think it's a good analogy of how we got culturally to where we are. It actually, you can trace it upstream and see the factory dumping pollutants into the river. That's what we're drinking nowadays, the water supply.
Is natural law the #1 enemy of critical theory?
That's a great question. It is one enemy, and it does relate to the idea among critical theorists that all norms, all values, all claims of right and wrong, good and evil are really just secretly the ruling class imposing their will on us. So natural law says, no, actually, there's a God who designed the universe and built his values and his thoughts and his reason into the way the world works. That's when we can detect that. We can know, for example, not through the Bible alone, we can know just through experience and nature that there are two genders, male and female. Well, critical theory detests that idea. Detests the idea that there is an objective, absolute standard that we actually should submit to. They want to cast all these values and systems and norms as, white values or male values or Western values, whereas natural law says no. They're the creator's values that we all must submit to, whether we're black, white, male, female, Hispanic, Asian, rich, poor. So yeah, that attack on natural law is a big part of this.
So if you get caught up in trying to digest all of these options, I shouldn't say options, all of these theories, and you start dissecting those apart, it seems to me that we believers need to stop right there and ask ourselves, what's going on here? And really, what's going on? Let's go back to natural law. If they're trying to redefine natural law as not being anything that is truth or substantial, then you are defying that there is a creator and a God. And it seems like to me that is, in a silent way, that's number one enemy to critical theory.
Yeah, I think we frame it, we talk about it in the sense that critical theory is a wholly secular, this worldly theory. They're looking at the world around them with no vertical component at all. So it's not like they're openly atheistic. You don't open the book and say, we don't believe in God. But their assumptions baked into their worldview is the idea there is no God. There is no, in fact, there's no absolute standard of anything. They even dispute the idea that, say, science is objective and rational and universal. So there's a big difference actually here between, say, critical theorists today, progressive activists today, and say the new atheists of the 2010s. So the new atheist movement was really big in the 2000s, 2010s, but they were insistent that we can get rid of God, supernatural religion, and we will just live in a place that's rooted in science, in reason, and logic and evidence. All we care about is science, reason, logic, and evidence. But ironically, they were closer to a Christian view of the world because they assumed there was a reality out there to which all of us were accountable. There is a truth out there that we have to then submit to. Critical theorists are much more postmodern in thinking that truth itself is a social construct. So yeah, it's a very weird, and actually we've seen some people who were new atheists 20 years ago who've become much more open to Christianity because they're realizing that they share more in common, even as atheists, with Christians who still believe in truth than with progressives who no longer believe in truth at all.
That's a big statement. All right, so let me unpack that a little bit. If critical theory is going to try to redefine natural law, then in their thinking, there's no such thing as natural truth, right? Yeah,
so I know it sounds crazy, but there's a famous textbook on critical race theory. It's one flavor of critical theory. And they say, quote, in their book, quote, objective merit, like objective truth, does not exist, at least in the realm of social sciences. Truth is a social construct that is a mechanism by which the ruling class basically enforces their views in society. So we should take that quote seriously. They really are claiming, at least in some areas, that there is no objective truth. It's really, you've been told it's objective, but really it's a way for, say, in this case, whites, to justify their power. So you're right, objective natural law and objective truth are tied together. They're rejecting really both, and at least in some sense, they might concede. So some critical theorists would concede, okay, there is actually a rock outside the Earth is actually a sphere, but they will want to cast doubt on any of your social judgments, which they include things like male and female. They'd say, yeah, sure, some people have XY chromosomes, but you've been conditioned to call those people men. And actually, we need to question whether men are just defined by chromosomes rather than by this internal sense of self, by society, by culture. They want to question all of that. So they're going to raise doubts about things you take for granted as obviously true.
So why hasn't their argument ever spilled over into the plant world and the animal world?
That's a great question. I will point out that there is a small movement called critical species theory that does try to apply this more broadly, not the gender thing, but they try to blur the line not just between, say, male and female, but they're trying to blur the line between human and animal even. Like what makes humans special? Why are we different? We're really just animals. We've been conditioned to think of humans as superior and powerful and rational. So my only point is, yes, they're erasing all those hard lines that we've drawn and calling them into question. And queer theory in particular, another critical theory, it really does center on erasing boundaries, transgressing boundaries, and making you doubt what you know about everything, including boundaries like male, female. And the really scary edge of that theory has to do with the boundaries between adult and child, unfortunately related to sexuality. Some queer theorists are openly questioning whether or not pedophilia is moral and ethical because they are just saying the same reasoning. If male and female are social constructs and they don't really mean anything, then adult and child are social constructs. So why should we observe these boundaries between adults and children when it comes to it's awful, but and it's there, and parents need to know about this.
I asked a veterinary friend of mine the other day, I said, in veterinary school, I went to the University of California there, Davis, great vet school there, and I said, were you ever taught how to take a stud horse and turn it into a filly? I mean, you can't do it. You can't do it.
Put it in a dress, I guess, right? Yeah.
You can't do it. I don't know. So to that point, let me ask you this, and I'll take a break and we'll come back and finish it. Your book, Post-Woke, suggests maybe we've hit the wall here.
Maybe. Our big point in the book is that even if we've hit peak woke and things culturally have kind of shifted, two big points. One, the younger generation is very woke. The data show that. About 30% of Gen Z identify as LGBTQ+. 30%. About 80% of Gen Z believes that society is divided into oppressors and oppressed, right? It's poll data. So even if all your peers who are 40 and 50, Gen Xers and boomers, whatever, they are like, well, we're not woke. Yes, but our next crop of the nation's lawyers, doctors, senators, and pastors are still predominantly awash in these ideas. That's number one. Number two, no matter what, the woke will always be with us. There are people in your community, in your schools, in your churches who still believe these ideas. Even if they fall out of fashion in the broader culture, think like a missionary. We still have to reach individual people who might embrace these ideas even when they're passé in the culture. I guess I'll say two more things. Education is captured by wokeness. If you're a parent and your kids are going to colleges, even a Christian college, they will be exposed to these ideas and you have to equip them. And then finally, I'll just say in a democracy, we are at any point 4 years away from President Ocasio-Cortez or President Gavin Newsom. That's just a reality. So if you think wokeness is done, Trump killed it, well, unfortunately, in 2 years, it might come roaring back. So be prepared.
All right, let me take a quick break here. Check out Dr. Shenvi's book. I think you'll find it to be fascinating. Post-Woke, Asserting a Biblical Vision of Race, Gender, and Sexuality. So this is a real tool and resource and helps you in defending your faith. You can check out his website, Shenvi, that's Shenvi, ShenviApologetics.com. And there's a picture of his landing page. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Such an honor to have back with us today Dr. Neil Shenvi. He's a Christian author, speaker, researcher. He's got a new book out that he has co-authored with. It's called Post-Woke, Asserting a Biblical Vision of Race, Gender, and Sexuality. I think you'll find this to be an amazing resource for you to have in any form of defending your faith. Check it out. And Dr. Shenvi does have a website, Shenvi, SHENVI, apologetics.com. I was trying to figure out during the break, I was going to ask you a couple questions here. Do you think that the average Christian today understands what we're talking about?
No. Unfortunately, I think they're aware of it. I think they can sense that something is going on in our culture, something has gone wrong with our culture. And of course, there are always many things wrong with every culture because we're sinners living in a fallen world. But specifically, they see that somehow topics of race, and gender and sexuality and physical ability and colonialism, they're all mixed together. There's some kind of left-wing progressive zeitgeist, some mood they can't quite grasp. They see yard signs that, in this house we believe Black Lives Matter, reproductive rights are human rights, trans rights are human rights, all that stuff. They see some unifying theme to that, but they can't quite figure out the ideas underneath it. Or they see contradictions. For example, they'll see signs like Queers for Palestine. Those signs showed up after the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel, October 7th, 2023. There's a group called Queers for Palestine, people that were identifying as queer, but actually pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine. And you think, wait a minute, Muslim culture, to say the least, is not very favorable towards LGBTQ plus. So what in the world? You see Muslims promoting LGBTQ stuff in the United States, and like, wait a minute. Again, traditionally, Islam views homosexuality as very sinful and negative. So what's going on? If you understand these ideas, which we talk about in our book at length, then you'll understand, no, it all actually fits together. For example, the reason that you see the synergy between, say, Muslims and LGBTQ activists is that both are viewed as oppressed groups, right, within critical theory. And then what's more, intersectionality is the idea that you can't separate out anti-racist activism from a feminist activism, from LGBTQ activism. They're all interlocking.
Yeah.
So actually, Ibram Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, says, quote, "It is impossible to be anti-racist if you are not anti-capitalist, if you are not feminist, if you are homophobic or transphobic. All those things are incompatible with being an anti-racist." So it's just laid out there.
With the elimination, or the maybe diluting, but primarily the elimination of natural law, that's opened the door for a term that we run into called social justice. So it creates an opportunity for all of these aberrant groups to have an expression for their existence. Therefore, they have to commingle because they create a force. It's kind of like Mondami in New York. In New York, he's clearly, excuse me, a radical Islamist, but he's using socialism to advance where he wants to go. And those two things alone wouldn't coexist normally, but they are there. So my question would be, if social justice is the new term that's out there that's giving all of these aberrant groups and expressions life, what happens to biblical justice?
Right. So we offer in our book an alternative. One of our big emphases in the book is that it's not enough to simply contradict critical theory and woke ideology. You can't just say this is wrong and slap people's hands and say you can't embrace that, which is true, but it's not sufficient. If you have a man starving to death and he's eating moldy bread and you knock it out of his head and say, hey, that's moldy bread, he's going to pick it up and eat it. You have to do more than that to give him some real food. So we want to offer people a positive alternative to wokeness and critical theory that takes biblical justice seriously, that understands race biblically, gender biblically, sexuality biblically. And that's going to fill the void in people's lives and hearts that they're trying to fill with these bad ideas. So we go through these hot button issues, race, gender, sexuality, and show not only that critical theory views them wrongly, but the Bible's vision is true, good, and beautiful.
There's much talk and even research. Dr. George Barna does this, talking about how those under the age of 40 now have hit the wall of what really is truth, and they're now investigating faith. It seems to be more predominant among males than females, but nonetheless, there seems to be an interest in faith. Kind of pulling you out of this argument just for a moment. Where do you see in your thinking the transcendence of God getting involved with this mess?
I think it's important to keep in mind that God is sovereign. That's so important. And actually, this is the other thing. God is sovereign, and the gospel is sufficient. We don't have to be afraid that the gospel will not really speak to these cultural issues. It doesn't have the power that it once did, that we first have to convince people of to be on the right set of cultural issues first, and then the gospel can reach them. And now, I am not against fixing people's wrong ideas. That's the point of our book. but have faith in the power of this transcendent God to break into people's lives and break the shackles of these bad ideas. I mean, think about the Roman world that Paul was preaching to. It was filled with every kind of immorality and brokenness and wickedness. And yet, what did he do? How did he combat it? Did he start, I'm not saying it's wrong, but he didn't start a political action committee. He didn't start protesting. He went and preached the good news that the God who created the universe and created nature, he came to rescue and to save. You can be forgiven. And that transformed people. It turned the world upside down. Again, I'm not at all saying don't get involved in politics. We have a whole section in our book on political steps you can take to fight critical theory. But don't give up. Don't feel like this is too much for me. I'm a simple man. If you can share the gospel with your friends and neighbors, you are working for God's kingdom, and he will bring healing to people's lives.
For generations, we've enjoyed our faith, and we really didn't have to defend it. But now we got to defend it. And we're caught in these arguments. And I guess my concern is, what would you say to people that we guard well, that we don't necessarily, our objective is not to win the argument as much as it is to win the heart? Mm-hmm. I mean,
I'd agree with that. Yeah. That when you do want to destroy every argument and pretension that sets itself up against God, I mean, that's Paul's statement in Corinthians, that we do want to destroy arguments, but not destroy people. We want to rescue people. Or actually, really, we want to point them to God who rescues people. So I think we should take the Bible's injunctions seriously, that we are to give a defense of our faith, but with gentleness and respect. We're to season our talk speech with salt and grace. We give an answer to everyone. But I think that we don't have to choose. We don't have to choose between truth and grace, because Jesus Christ came full of grace and truth, and so can we.
Is higher academia sold out to this nonsense?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, there are holdouts. And in fact, there's a growing movement among academics, even secular academics, who are fed up or disillusioned with the excesses or even the fundamentals of the woke movement and are pushing back against it, because they realize that critical theory really does oppose truth and knowledge and things like merit, and elevates things that really should not be prioritized in academia. I mean, academia was supposed to be about the search for truth and knowledge. Even secular people believed that, but they're seeing academia being consumed by other concerns other than the search for knowledge, and they're concerned to secular people. So yes, this is why we say to parents, if your kids are going to college, even if they're not, even if they're just going to the workplace directly, they are going to encounter human resources officers, professors, teachers who are spewing out these ideas, and they need to be able to counter them respectfully, but accurately and biblically. So we want to help them do that.
Less than about 30 seconds. What happened to DEI? You don't hear much about it.
You don't hear the term. This is a huge point. You can get rid of the term, and the ideas are still there under another name. This is why you can't just firebomb the term DEI or critical race theory or queer theory. The terms can vanish. The people are still teaching the ideas, and you need to prepare your kids and yourself to recognize the ideas and reject those.
Yeah, well, remember, it went from global warming to climate change. Still there.
Yeah, words change.
Yeah, word change it. Professor, thank you. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his book called Post-Woke, Asserting a Biblical Vision of Race, Gender, and Sexuality. There's a picture of the book on the screen. Where can they get it?
Anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, ChristianBook.com.
Okay, thank you for your work. Let's stay connected. Check out his website, ShenviApologetics.com, and there's a picture of the landing page. Dr. Shenvi, thank you, friend. Let's stay connected. You're fascinating. God bless you, friend.
Thank you so much.
Okay.